From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
The Business of Esports podcast is sponsored by Esports Entertainment Group, a leading esports and online gambling company. For more information, go check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics of news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love you give the podcast. Thank you for telling your friends about it. If you haven't already, go leave a review, a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to us. And by the way, go buy the Book of Esports. William, I know the Spanish translation is out now, right? So
yeah,
if you prefer it in Spanish.
It's not out, it's coming out very soon. So teaser, you guys, if you'd rather have it, and more language is coming. So, and spoiler for those, our guest is showing his receipt for the Book of Esports. So,
but if you bought the book,
there's a great guest this week. Spoiler, but we'll get to that in a second. Yeah.
If you bought the book, guys, please go show William some love. Leave that 5-star review on Amazon. Tell him how much you love the book. It is amazing. I mean, the first page is amazing, but the rest is also amazing. And show him some love. William, how you doing?
You know, it's been super busy, Paul, but as always, I'm doing really well. This is one of my favorite hours of the week, if not my favorite, sitting down with you to talk about the industry and all the great stuff that's happening. And it's not as exciting as last week when Heroes of the Storm had an update.
I was going to say, you have no Heroes news this week? Nothing? What are they doing over at Blizzard? I
know, right? I know. Come on, guys.
Are they giving up on this game?
No. This is it. Heroes 2 is coming any day now. We believe.
Is this why they canceled BlizzCon, William? Do you think? Is it because
there are theories? It's that or the Switch port of Heroes of the Storm, which obviously is
yes, they're just so focused on Heroes that they had to
every platform there is, right?
That's it. They canceled the whole thing.
Yeah.
Or they said Heroes is not ready to announce, so we have to cancel BlizzCon.
Well, you can't do it. I mean, that's what people want. It would be like, what else could you announce there?
No, look, we have the most amazing guest this week. It's been actually such a run of amazing guests.
Yeah, we've had a good streak.
But I have like really good feelings about today's podcast and what's going to come out of it. We have none other than Tobias Sherman on the podcast today. He's the co-founder and CEO of Foundry IV, a consulting and game development studio. Previously, he headed up WME IMG's esports division. Tobias has driven the industry forward with groundbreaking initiatives such as ELeague in partnership with Turner Broadcasting and esports training integration at IMG Academy. Tobias, welcome to the Business of Esports podcast.
Gentlemen, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Tobias, for our listeners who maybe don't know much about you or don't know what you've done, would love if you could give them some background. Obviously, you've been in gaming a long time. Just background on your career, what you've done in gaming, what you're doing in gaming right now, what you're excited about, what you're focused on, all those good things.
Sure. So the sort of elevator story would be, if we had to condense it, that I had some entrepreneurial success early. Essentially, at the time, my wife was like, "Hey, you can't, clean the grill every single day and, watch YouTube and walk the dog 15 times. He's like, maybe you should get like a hobby, or dive into something. And at that time, this is right before I think StarCraft 2 had come out, and we were starting to see some content creators. It was also the time that Entourage was on HBO, very popular show on HBO. And Jeremy Piven played Ari Emanuel, played the role of, the real life was based on Ari Emanuel. And I drew a lot of inspiration from that show. So I essentially set out, I started as a really old man casting. So all the kids were kind of like, what's this guy doing here? But I had a vision, right? I had a vision that if I could understand it from the talent level, which I was not a great caster, but if I could at least understand it from that level, then I could, establish myself and start to create some value for them. Because at the time, we were casting for free, and that's nothing against MLG or Sundance. Love them. It was just we had to do what we had to do as an industry, just to do it, just to get it out there. And it was extremely expensive to run that type of show. And believe me, Sundance and the guys, they wanted everybody to succeed and be paid. But at this time, it was a lot of just blood, sweat, and tears from everybody, it seemed, except for the publishers, ironically. So I opened the first esports agency. I based that around sort of Entourage. And it was a little slow to start, but we grew to offices in Korea and Germany, as well as Miami. And then essentially, my partner, Simon at Bitball, I had said to him, it's actually on a podcast, I said, look, we might not be ultra successful initially, but one day IMG will buy us. And so, the sort of one of the defining moments of my life was when I got the phone call from actually Ari saying, we'd love to, acquire your company, and it'd be an acqui-hire where you can come in and sort of be the North Star for the division and get things underway. So, that was sort of a dream for me, because I based it on, the show that I watched that was just based on his life, essentially. So, of course, that was a quick yes. And it was like a kid in a candy store when I first got there, because it's like, well, what do you want to do? And I remember they were so great. Like, at one point they gave me they did like a 40-page deck on, and I'm not going to name the genre, or it's not so much a game in particular, but it was a sector of esports that it was, let's say it's around collegiate. And I'm like, yeah, that's a no-go. And they took it and they threw it right in the trash. Nobody defended it. There was no ego. And I was like, moving on. And they were excited to move on. And I'm like, okay, these guys get it. He's like, we fail fast, we learn, let's go. And man, it wasn't much more than a few weeks, I think, before Jad Daya, who was an agent for, I believe, like Rob Deerdeck and Deerdeck's cousin Drama, had called, and he said, I don't know much about esports. And this is a very brave call for him to make, because it can be daunting, if you're from more of the traditional media end. And he said, but, what do you think about television? I said, well, we've been thinking about a league on TV, and to use that properly and really define it as a sport, and figure out how we could do it simultaneously on Twitch, and sort of tether sponsors to familiarity. And TV is the most familiar medium for them. So if we could be there and on Twitch simultaneously and show value, we can pass that value on to the teams. And there was only one partner for that, which was Turner. And they ended up being, like, of course, we had other talks with other networks, but like Turner was absolutely fantastic because they bought into the authenticity. Now, it didn't mean there weren't some meetings early on where I was wanting to flip a table or two over, like, during the education process of like, maybe it's extreme gaming. I'm like, nope. And so, it was that, but they learned very quick. Craig Berry at Turner embraced it. Equally as important, Seth Ledetsky, who ran, I believe he still does, their sales department, embraced it, brought us in front of all of their salespeople. It was like hundreds of people. It seemed like an army. And he was like, esports, learn it, love it, live it. And I was like, oh, they get it, man. They get it. And so that was great. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, like, Lenny Daniels was wonderful. And, there was just so many great people at Turner as well, just really getting behind it early on, before we even had like the team signed or the idea that we'll fly you in, and we're not insecure, we'll fly you to the next event, right? Probably the crowning achievement was getting Valve on the phone, because it was like not many people know this. This was a cold call. So I cold called Valve. I'm like, hey, I know Counter-Strike was on television before, but, can can I do it? Because it wasn't so great the first time. But look, it was a learning process. And those guys, kudos to them for giving it a shot. And, it was about 3 tense meetings for me. And then they finally said, yeah, sure. And then we invited them to Atlanta, invited all the teams to Atlanta to come and experience Turner and sort of give them what the joint venture would look like. And Valve was like, yeah, we probably won't show up, but thank you. And then they did show up. So we were like, okay, this is looking good, So they gave a tremendous amount of support and actually said, when more people watch it than play it, we'll worry about, the financials, which I think is a beautiful thing. They just said,
Wow.
put on a good show for the fans. That's what we want. And I mean, what a great attitude that was. So, and to this day, I'm still friends with David Levy. He was amazing at Turner. He was high on the totem pole over there, to say the least. But, you've got Lenny Daniels, you've got Levy, you've got Craig Berry, who has how many Emmys in sports. And then to have Craig say on, I'm going to wrap this up because it's getting a little long-winded with the story, but these are like important moments to me. And I think that giving a glimpse behind ELeague, I hope some of the fans of ELeague can appreciate those early days and to really give credit. I'd like to give credit to all these people because, it's important to have that person. When Star Wars was originally filming, a lot of people wanted to kill Star Wars, right? Like, could you imagine a world without that movie? And there was one producer that stayed in there and was like, just the whole way back in the whole thing. That gets hard to be that one guy, right? So fortunately, we didn't have that scenario. We had multiple people in support throughout the Turner team. And but when Craig got on with everybody and he said, and I'll actually give the reference. He said, I watched League of Legends and I watched a League of Legends playoff match. And he said, and there's every bit as much AAA sports production in that as there is an NBA game. And I was like, wow, like that brought a tear to my eyes for them to recognize that, to take the time to look, to really want to be, into it. And, there's some other people I'll mention throughout the podcast as well as it comes up, but, just really great. And the first team I called said no. And it was a huge European team. I mean, I'll tell you, it was ninjas in pajamas. Actually, it was their CEO was like, this will never happen. It's never going to get on television. We just need one league and all these different things. And, and I wasn't disappointed. I understood. I understood those viewpoints. I certainly wasn't ecstatic, but I knew they'd come around, and they did, and it was great. So from there, from ELeague, we really looked into the sports section of, how do we define these guys more as athletes? How do we show that? So IMG Academy was great. We ran some programs there. We brought FaZe Clan in. We brought Complexity in. And, there's a board there where you have to tap lights that come on to test reflexes, and you have to do math problems. And one of the snipers, I believe it was from FaZe, broke the standing record of the quarterback, the best quarterback had there, right? So it showed, and there was a direct correlation between like that board and how good your snipers were on the team. So we were starting to find a lot of cool things behind the data, and from there it was like deal after deal after deal in terms of, bringing in non-endemics. But ultimately, this is, and I think, Paul, William, I think you'll really get this probably more than most. About the time Overwatch League was getting organized, I'd met with Bobby at WME, and it was an interesting meeting. And, really talking about financials and growth. And in my opinion was maybe it's too fast. We should probably maybe hit brakes, which I'm not known for. But the point was, we got sort of tired of having to fight the publishers every step of the way. And you have to understand, this is at a time where they're still patching the game before a championship event, which is like, what are you doing? Like that's like changing the basketball hoop from 10 feet to 11 or down to 8. Like, what are you doing? And, but we were still much further away from where they weren't paying prize pools. So luckily we left that behind in the dust. But, so from there, we said, why are we educating the publishers? We should be the publisher, and we should start creating these games. And we should really do it from not even a financial standpoint, but a standpoint of innovation and user-generated content to get people to really be able to showcase their skills. So that's what led us up to Foundry. We announced Cash Royale. Cash Royale, it has a lot of moving parts to it, but it is centered around live events. So when COVID hit, obviously we looked at our slate, and one of our pieces, and this is credit to Simon, was the user-generated content piece. And he said, well, we're such good friends with Nunez, and Chris has really wanted to do something in the esports space for a while. As a matter of fact, he was supposed to tattoo on ELeague's debut. He couldn't make it last minute because I think of a plane issue. And plane issue is me covering for him because he had hand, foot, and mouth disease because his daughter sneezed in his mouth. Sorry, Chris. So he looked like the thing, like his hands were peeling. It was bad. But Garver made it, and there was a famous, tattoo story that we don't need to get into, but it was good around luminosity. But Chris was so patient. We've been friends for a really long time, and this is like 4 or 5 years in the making in terms of we're going to do something in Art Basel with like real weapons from real weapon skins. And there was a couple different ideas, but we benched them all until we found something that fit. And Simon put 2 and 2 together and was like, well, online competitive coloring book with Chris, you and all your art friends from not just tattoo, but street art. And we can, get into the licensing and have people sort of celebrate art. And, eventually where that will segue is that we'll plug into all of our games and hopefully other games as well, as sort of like what you see with Steam and Valve in terms of being able to, create weapon skins. But we're trying to make it a lot easier and a lot more convenient and maybe even more democratic to where we may not even, decide to be the curators of it. It might just be a vote system, or it might just be like anybody can put it up on the market. So these are this was the trajectory we were on, and we were able to get the app done and out. And as a standalone, it's been fantastic. Simon is a pure genius. One last story real quickly. A lot of people ask me this all the time. Why Counter-Strike? How'd you pick Counter-Strike? So I didn't pick Counter-Strike. I went to a meeting with Turner, and we agreed on doing a league before we had the game. I would have loved to have done League of Legends, but I said to everybody, listen, I'm not even going to ask Riot. They probably have no interest in television because they're doing so well outside of it regardless. And I love them, and they're great, and people can hate all they want, but damn, they drove this industry forward. Every deck had the Staples Center sold out. I don't care. Every deck had it at some point. Like if you didn't, it was just a bad deck. Long story short, Simon was like, no, we're going to do Counter-Strike. And I was like, oh, that's going to be great. Great idea. And as soon as I make fun of Simon's idea, let's go over let's look at some of the ones in the past. We'd one day be legal in the United States. Yeah, okay, Simon. Good joke, buddy. Yeah, bet your money on that one. Here's the other one. Might come to tears. Simon's definitely going to cry. Hey, Tobe, there's this thing called Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I'm like, okay, buddy. Yeah, let's just open an office and put computers and mine this imaginary money. That's great, dude. So I learned that when Simon says something and I go to make fun of competitive coloring book, I'm like, okay, great idea. Let's go with that. Second, I make fun of it, right? So Simon had said, we're going to do Counter-Strike. It's easy to understand, 2 minute rounds, natural halftime. We can put advertisers here, and here. And I'm like, and not be intrusive. And I'm like, oh my God, he's right. And then for me, I was like, well, the narrative isn't terrorist versus counter-terrorist, because you have to understand at the time there's a lot of school shootings and things of that nature. But it's still a problem that plagues the world, frankly. But when you look at it, it's not about that. It's about Luminosity versus Cloud9, or pick your favorite team, right? Whichever teams you want. That's what it's about. It's not about the blood, the gore, any of that. And those of us that know video gaming understand that. So we had to sort of, inspire people to want to learn about it a little bit and watch it. And I think that, we had a better format than most did. This is before any franchises had existed, season 1 of ELeague. And I think Simon just absolutely nailed it. That was his brilliance, that he picked the title, a lot of the show format, and then the Turner production team. Like that's where we weren't, that we weren't any part of the behind the camera stuff. We were there, we got to watch it, and they just killed it. They did great. Christina did good. everybody did. I remember Richard Lewis. I remember first telling Richard he was a bit of a doubting Thomas, and then seeing him on the desk was great. So yeah, I was scared to death at CES when it was about to debut, and there was like nobody in our corridor. And then they took me and said, "You better go look like around the corner." And there was a long line. Optic had won their way in. All very special moments for me. But all of this for me was like cherry on top, because behind all those scenes was what I really loved, which was the sponsors coming on board. Craig Berry pitching to Arby's and having them come on first. The stadium chanting for Arby's because the commercial was so good. When was the last time you ever heard of a stadium chanting for a sponsor, right? It doesn't happen. So we took all of those experiences and wanted to wrap those into being a game publisher and being, let's be free to play. Let's be access driven. The great thing about soccer is if you have a can and two goals, you can go and kick a can and play soccer anywhere you are, right? So it doesn't matter if you're in a poor country. Unfortunately for us in this space, we need to figure out how to solve those problems and make things more accommodating. So that's the story. I'm so sorry I've taken up so much time. I tried to get as much as I could into it. It's been a long career, thank God. It feels like I just started though, so I'm going to shut up now. But yeah, that's A to Z where we are.
Tobias, you single-handedly touched on like pretty much every major theme we have hit on this podcast in the last 130 episodes. I will just say, you asked, could we imagine a world without Star Wars? I will just throw this in there. We could imagine a world without the last 3 Star Wars movies, just to be clear. Okay.
In fact, I might be not imagining, but actively hoping that world comes into.
Yeah.
There are some fan theories.
But sorry, William, I don't know if you wanted to start here.
I'm trying to think, because there's so much in what you shared, Tobias, and I'm kind of trying to think about the best way to unpack it, and maybe zeroing in on ELeague. I don't know what you think, Paul. Maybe ELeague is a good place to start, because it is such an important moment in esports history, right? And you played such a pivotal part in basically bringing games to TV. And I guess the first question I want to ask about that is this idea of the dual broadcast, right? TV and Twitch, right? Like, because I go back to thinking of regular terrestrial broadcasters, and basically you're talking to them and they'll be like, well, this isn't exclusive. Like, someone else gets it too. Like, and it's on at the same time, and maybe a demo that I want is maybe gonna I mean, can you talk more about how you were able to kind of pull off that approach, basically?
Yeah, that is apart from getting Valve pretty awesome, because again, to Turner's credit, so here's how it went. I have a 45-minute dissertation prepared for why it has to live on both, and no matter what FCC rules or whatever, we have to figure it out, right? And so essentially what ends up going down is I say something to the effect of, all right, guys, here's the situation. If you really want people to subscribe to the OTT or whatever service it is that you guys have or developing, and you really want to get viewership and you want to be authentic, then we can't be insecure. We have to share an audience with Twitch. And I believe it was Lenny Daniels that said, and it might have, David Levy may have been there too, or Kevin Riley, and they looked and they go, yeah, okay. And I'm like, well, I have 40 minutes left of convincing you, like, really? Like, that's it? But they had the foresight. They understood. So that was huge for me, because it's like, well, okay, I'd rather go in over-prepared, I guess. And that was sort of a recurring theme at Turner, where it was like, there was a few times where we'd warn them, and then they really, it was rare, but they wouldn't listen, and they'd come back and go, oh yeah, Reddit's a thorny place. Like, we got to be careful. So should not change the AK-47 sound. We should leave it the same of what it was. That was a bad call. So, that was an actual example. So Turner was on board from the start. I felt like in order to share the audience, to be authentic, because our battle cry pre-production was, let's be authentic. Into season 1, it became, what can we do better, right? And then after that, I really, Simon and I, that was it. It was their baby. We had done it. We'd gotten the rights to use the game. We had gotten the initial talent, for the most part, all the team signed that we needed. And, after that, it was more we had other fish to fry, and we of course naturally stayed on the board and would help. But I think they had a general understanding of they had that audience. But yeah, to your question, William, it was more or less, Turner understanding and trusting. Turner had an immense amount of trust that they instilled sort of in the team, both from WME and their Turner side, and that's where we were.
And then sorry, Paul, then I'll be quiet because I'm sure, but
No.
drilling on that, another aspect of it. So how did you approach the dual audience, right? So you've now sold Turner on this idea that it's a simultaneous broadcast. How did you think about that? Did you think about bifurcating? Okay, the online viewers are going to be one way, the terrestrial viewers are going to be another. Did you think about, did you segment differently for sponsors? Because it's a very unique situation to have basically a single media property going to two, which is a live event property, going to two broadcasters at the same time. Can you just say more about how you treated the online terrestrial dynamic?
Yeah, sure. So it's a great question, and it's one that I wasn't even prepared to think about after they said yes, because I thought it was going to be such a fight, right? So the way we looked at it was, we're going to have a more educated entertainment consumer on Twitch. Obviously, they do this every day. They log plenty of hours watching, and they know it inside and out. We really need to cater both broadcasts to them. But what everybody, I think, appreciates is when you do a little breakdown of, hey, for those that don't know, even if you're an esports veteran and you watch, you might pick up something that you didn't realize. That's happened to me on some of these breakdowns, where it's wow, I didn't realize that the origin of this was that. There are, different examples, but we tried to make it, the trick there was making it so that a brand new TV audience could understand it. If a son or daughter came in and said, hey, this is what I'm into, it's on TV, this is, please, watch with me. And so what did that mean for parents, and what did that mean for advertisers to both parents and kids? So that's how we looked at it, as more as, it wasn't so much, William, it wasn't so much do we need to serve ads differently, right, on both platforms? So obviously, we've got sort of our main sell through. Now, I will say this, the run, and this runs into, and I'm not going to profess to be an expert here, but there are some FCC rules where the primary broadcast on Turner had to be more premium. And that concerned me. But I also understand the economics of putting a show like this together, and the tens of millions it cost. Meant that, you need authentication, you need to have a good audience, and you need to have that audience, into whatever the sponsors are pitching, hopefully. So, huge shout out to HyperX, because they came on board. Our season one was TT Esports, or excuse me, not TT Esports. It might've been TT Esports. Yeah. BenQ, these guys, I remember, I'm not going to name who I mentioned, but it's a major brand, and they were not for it. And then the next season they were totally for it, which is fine. I understand. But, had I thought about that more, that's something we could have done better. I think we could have maybe advertised both streams a little more independently, maybe a little bit better. I mean, I wasn't ultimately disappointed, but there was more left on the table there. Yeah.
That's interesting. And then one more, sorry, Paul, one more just on this, because the other thing you said is you talked about creating the narrative, and you said the thing about, because the other thing is Counter-Strike, you mentioned, as a choice of game, there's a lot of good reasons to do Counter-Strike. There's a major reason not to do Counter-Strike, though, which is it's shooting with guns. Yeah. And it's not even, there's a lot of shooting with guns games. This is terrorists, right? As you said. In there's a lot of sensitivities around that for the first esports event to go on TV. And I think it was very smart that you said you turned it into you could argue football isn't football, right? It's Dallas Cowboys versus New England Patriots, right? It's interesting that you keyed on the rivalries there between the teams, but how did you go about de-emphasizing the actual narrative of the game, which is maybe a little problematic, and emphasize the meta narrative? How did you go about building
that? Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, we had it holstered in case there was a massive media problem. I mean, let's face it, Turner owns CNN. So if there is going to be an issue, it's going to be aired there. And it's not, the integrity is of the utmost to where we expected them to run a story. It's not well, hey, you also do ELeague, you probably shouldn't. No, it was there. It was a very real concern. The good news was this, William, that 90, 8% of our audience probably already understood it. It was more for the advertisers that were concerned, and when that was something they would voice, it ended up, the narrative was more back of the house. I mean, I got a lot of it was a bit of a lightning rod when I brought up new sports, and I said, look, new sports can be a term that we should package VR, AR, esports into when describing this to sponsors, because I'm having a lot more success with that, because esports kind of had a baggage, if you will, with it, and sort of new sports was resonating, and people. I was touched that so many people got so passionate about it, because that's what I love. Let's have awkward conversations. Let's drive stuff forward. What works, what doesn't. But sort of the point being at that time was there's two narratives you're pushing. There's the brand building, right? We're going to build ELeague as a brand. We're not going to take it for granted. We're going to, the guys at Cartoon Network did a great job advertising. A lot of people didn't realize they had a hand in that. And then, we're also going to push narrative toward the sponsors that, here's where the value is. This is how to do it authentically. And we're here to support you. And I think, by the way, kudos to Arby's for turning their sandwich into a bomb. That is, who does that? And it worked. It worked great because it connected. And, before the Geico TSM stuff that they did, that was, I think, fantastic with the Team House. That was a really pivotal moment. So, I think that the narrative, William, was more back of the house.
I want to zoom in, Tobias, a bit, or zoom out a bit on ELeague here. And let me just use something else as a reference, okay? Overwatch League, as you know, aired games on, I think, ABC, right? It was ABC that they aired. They aired some matches.
We did it on ELeague too. Before Overwatch League existed.
Yes.
I was. They were very gracious, actually, to allow us to use Overwatch. Just FYI. I mean, that's not what you're. Anyway, please.
Well, I was gonna say this literally goes back to maybe episode 2 or 3 of the podcast, literally years ago, where I think we had an entire discussion around the feeling that CS:GO as a spectator sport was easier to understand, easier to pick up, had more drama because it's round based, right? Fit better from a spectator standpoint than something like Overwatch. Now, when Overwatch League aired games on ABC, the reaction, if you saw the reaction online, it was, I would say, less than positive, right? You had a lot of people going what the hell is this? Why am I watching, these nerds? What are all these flashing colors? This isn't sports, right? You have a lot of old man yelling at cloud. And and I guess here's my question around ELeague and your experience with ELeague specifically, but it's a broad question, which is, do you think esports needs linear TV to be successful? Do you think
they never did? No, and I was on record for this. But just because you need it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, right? Does it make it better? Sure. And would esports have been just fine without ELeague? Absolutely. Did ELeague help instill order and stop some of the empire building that was going on that would have been bad for players and bad for teams? Absolutely. So I think that television, the goal with television, again, was to tether familiarity with sponsors to what they know. Now, they know it was irrelevant. They know that streaming is the future at the time, and they know that they're looking at ratings that don't really matter anymore. But having said that, they still can't, the older executives still are tethered to it. So did it help advance non-endemics to come in and money flood in? Absolutely. Did that have negative consequences associated? It certainly did. I think when, the powers that be saw it, and I'll be frank, and I don't blame Bobby at all. When he saw where it was going, because you have to understand, to this point, StarCraft, right? Brood War, and it was all community based. The publisher didn't want to have to deal with patching and issues, so you had to be creative as a community to come up with what maps work, and it was always community driven, if you think about it. And think about this for a second. Think about this: every esports title has pretty much been created out of a different engine, right? Like if you look at Defender of the Ancients and, it's all these esports Counter-Strike. Oh, they're all mods basically, right? They were all mods created by the community. It's beautiful. So, I think with ELeague, we didn't need television, but we were happy to have it. And I will say another thing I'm very proud of, and credit to WME and Turner on this, was that they really went to the areas and made the effort to outreach to those people that maybe those darn kids, as well as the darn kids. Meaning, Buffalo Wild Wings was a sponsor, and we would hear all the time. We got stories of they wouldn't put it on. They wouldn't put it on the TVs because they said it wasn't sports, even though they're a sponsor. And Buffalo Wild Wings went ahead and put out a franchise-wide memo on, if they ask, you must put it on. It is sports. So it was great. Like that, without TV, we don't have those moments.
Okay, but fast forward like 5 years from now or 10 years from now, sure. How big of a component do you think is linear TV in the esports landscape? And the follow-up question is, if we're putting resources and things into linear TV, right? Companies, tournaments, if anyone at all is focused on linear TV, are we losing focus on maybe what is more the future of esports in terms of platforms? Or do you think really, we will see a Monday Night Football style esports broadcast, right? Like it'll be prime time and it'll be on, and NBC will have one and ABC will have one, and they'll all be competing. Like, what does that future look like from a broadcast perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think to answer that question, we have to start with like, where is broadcast media right now? And I think what you're seeing is essentially you used to have cable, and then that would come with, some channels you love, some you didn't, but it really wasn't a la carte. And now all of a sudden we have what started as more of an a la carte service, which has now turned into cable again, if you think about it, because all the companies have just created an app that you now have to subscribe to, right? So it's like it's become a la carte, yet now I have to subscribe to everything anyway. Even if it feels like I don't want to. I'm such a Star Wars fan that in the second Mandalorian comes out, yep, Disney Plus, check. Okay, anime, Hulu, check. Netflix, because it's a staple. And then all of a sudden now I'm looking at like Peacock, all the other ones, like, the Star Trek is going to run a new series. Okay, get that one. It becomes sort of like,
maybe don't get the Star Trek one. I think that might disappoint you a little bit. No, I love Star Trek.
I was into the whole Mycelium network because, like, when you get into I'm going to super nerd out on like, how Mycelium works and mushrooms in general, how they're huge organisms that can span, like, I think the largest mycelium mat is, I believe, in California, and it spans like almost the whole state, and all regions of that mat are intelligent anyway. But yeah, to your point, we can skip that whole discussion. But but to get back to Paul's great, and so far I keep saying every question is great because they are. I mean, they really are. These are good questions. It's in my opinion, I think that as it tends to expand and contract between what was a la carte and what is going to end up maybe looking like cable again, just in a different format where you're streaming it over the internet rather than having coaxial, you really hit on the key word, which is like, what is the importance, and are we losing anything by that focus? And will we see a Monday Night Football? I think we will, and I think I know the person I know the person who has the potential to do it. It's Ariel Horn, who was originally at Riot Games, and great friend of mine. When I would have to call on behalf of Monty or any of the casters to do a deal that we represented, it was him I had to talk to at Riot, and he was very gracious. It wasn't like, we're Riot, blah 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 blah. He understood talent. He understands production, and Ariel and I were very close to working on a few projects together, just like myself and Chris and Simon and Chris, where we had to wait for the right opportunity. I would love to work with him, but I believe whether we work together is inconsequential. I think Ariel has the ability the intellect and the sort of emotional intelligence to be able to convey a Monday Night Football style event upwards and down. And what I mean by up and down is down to the audience and up to the executives, because you have to get that match right. Like, yeah.
Tobias, look, so I have very strong feelings about Venn. Venn has done a great job burning tens of millions of investor dollars, but with not much to show for it. But I guess if I'm pressing here, it's like TV, right? That physical object has relatively limited interactivity, right? And linear, therefore, like putting esports on linear TV, you limit that spectator experience to something that has been the same for the last, 70 years, basically. The question is, when you are there new do you think the future of esports are on platforms that aren't limited by sort of old-fashioned hardware and norms?
Right. It's funny because I was playing. I usually don't console game, but I was doing it, and I was playing Kingdom Hearts 3 because I have to beat it. It's been I have to finish it, and I enjoy the game. Don't have a lot of time, but the point is, like, what is so cool about playing on this television? Why does this feel good to me? I go, is it because I'm older and I came up on Nintendo, ColecoVision, and that was all through the TV. And as a kid, that really had an effect. And like, I'm taking over the family TV, and this is my time to use the TV. And I love this time because I get to play my video games. So that obviously had a profound effect on me, right? So do kids today feel the same way? They're like my son, who is, consumes media on his phone a lot, on an iPad. And that's what I'm going to answer. I'm going to dovetail that into my answer, Paul, because here's what I think happens. I don't think we have to decide between what device we watch on. I think we need to tailor it more toward combining the devices for a better experience. And what I mean by that is you can have a second screen experience. I mean, look, we've got 3 monitors now, right? Like, I remember when 2 was a lot, right? Now we have 3, maybe a 4th above, if you're like Simon and what I aspire to, because I can put like movies there. But you've got 3 monitors. Why not have a great second? And look, I think we're just scratching the surface on what we can do, be it betting or interacting with other fans or, interacting with teams, which I think is important. I think that's something that traditional sports need to look to esports to really garner some more interactivity to hold those fans. So I think, Paul, when you say, and it's when you said like this box, right, this antiquated tech and antiquated sort of infrastructure that has changed. I don't think it's either or. I think it's combining both.
Interesting. Let's move on. Let's move on from ELeague. You obviously spent a ton of time on the talent side with WME, IMG, and heading up their esports division, Tobias. We just had Jessica Blevins on the podcast last week, who manages, I would argue, the biggest name in all of gaming, Ninja. Where do you see, like, how has the talent side evolved for you? And what are some of the trends you're seeing? Like, a lot of the conversation with Jessica was around what's next for Ninja, movies and TV and sort of broader entertainment. What were some of the trends and like the evolution that you saw on the talent side from an esports perspective?
So at that time, my proudest moment was, and I'm sorry, it's going to be another ELeague anecdote here, but it's really not an anecdote. So I had told Turner that our talent is every bit as good as your talent on television, and that we could carry a broadcast. And again, to Turner's credit, man, boy, the thing with Turner was like, okay, let's do that. And I'm like, oh God, I'm going to go throw up now. My boys better not let me down, right? So these are my guys. So it was Thorin. It was at CES, and Thorin gets into it with Shaquille O'Neal. And this was not planned. This is totally, it went viral immediately. And it was Shaq sort of challenging a little bit of, is it a sport? Is it not? Which we loved. We're like, great, let's get that conversation going, And it was Thorin, and anybody that knows Thorin, don't bring the knife to the bazooka. Like, it's forget guns, right? Like, he's a wealth of knowledge. He may not always say it the best, right? Like, he maybe doesn't always deliver it. Personally, I think he has almost a flawless delivery when he's on, but he said some things in the past that, I know people, nobody's going to say when your job is to speak to an audience, you're going to offend somebody, right? But getting away from all that and talking about where Shaq challenges him, he's like, I'll play you in any sport. And he's like, well, how about running? And he was so quick with it, and he could keep up with Shaq. And then to have Shaq go full buy-in the next week and do an ELeague commercial for us was massive. So I always had advocated for the talent, but people don't understand agents and what agents go through. They'll never get a client in Korea's got an issue, and it was a real issue. And it's like, I'm on an airplane to Korea for 16 hours. And I would get up. So when we were first working with talent before IMG, it was just me, Lily and Simon, and that was it. And I would have to be in all three time zones. I would have to be in Europe, Korea, and obviously, four, because both sets of the states. So my sleeping schedule was completely thrown off. I wouldn't be where I am today. Nobody would without Tasteless and Artosis from StarCraft, because we represented them. I still regret the way sort of our relationship had ended, but we were diversifying quickly. And I think every agent has this story of, essentially when it comes times to part ways with talent, sometimes it's just, you've done all you can together, and it's best just to part at that point. And, when we parted, it allowed us to do a lot more. And I think it allowed them, a fresh look and some different opportunity as well. We'll always love those guys, owe our career to them. They took a chance on us early. It was great. But dealing with talent, people don't understand how good agents, and I mean in the Hollywood world as well, do this. Now, yeah, do you hear stories about slimy agents? Of course, because that's good, typecast bullshit. But in reality, a lot of agents genuinely care, to the point where we would lose sleep at night over it. As a matter of fact, I can remember, speaking of Ninja, when Ninja came out, I thanked God, because the amount of pressure that would have been there to deliver. I remember, I'm sure William Morris had talked to him post me leaving, and I just was like, thank the Lord that whoever has that job, it's going to be a big one. And I think he's got the best, right? You had her on last week, and it really points to the fact that when I came in, I wasn't a lawyer. I had no agent training. I watched Entourage. I'm not going to lie. I was fake it till you make it. Now, I won't mention who it was, but one of the biggest agents at WME, and he was just amazing. I mean, this guy represents some of the biggest guys. All right, I'll say it was Adam Bennett, and I love Adam. I know there's been some issues in the past, whatever it was, but everybody's got some issue somewhere. And I told Adam Bennett, he wanted to hear the story of sort of how we built it. And this guy represents Adam Sandler, if I'm not mistaken, Stallone. It was amazing. This list, this guy's one of my heroes in terms of business. And I'm sitting in his office, and I'm like, man, I was fake it till you make it. And he goes, I still am. And that statement was oh my God, what an amazing, powerful statement. Not to have any insecurity, not to be I'm the big greatest, just this whole, what can we learn, and that is arguably, in a world where agents may be disappearing. And I think agencies understand this. I think not disappearing in the sense that they're not needed. They are. I think that they need to change the economics around how agents are rewarded, because you're not an agent anymore, Paul. You're not, when you're dealing with talent. Okay. In esports, we have this sponsor. A perfect example of this would have been Hearthstone. Zero support from Blizzard. And by the way, fine, we were okay. I'm not being hard on them. I'm saying they had no plan, but we wanted to put it on as an esport. So we had to buy all the decks. We had to come up with the format ourselves, and we have a sponsor. So it's we have to create the tournament ourselves now. So it was all based on need, right?
Yeah.
We had to invent it, basically. That's not unlike Hollywood in terms of agents. They're more of almost mini producers, because now they have to not just pitch their talent, but they have to pitch the demo they can grab and different interesting ways to position it. And they're really a part of the creative process in a bigger way than people realize they are. And in Hollywood, you can't be a producer and an agent. I think it's the Paramount decree, potentially, that it basically stopped like monopolies from occurring top down, bottom up. But you can be a manager, see, and you can
Yep.
get a production, which
But-
so it's difficult. Yeah, please.
Is the metric for success, you think, with esports agents now, how effectively you can get your talent, your star opportunities outside of esports? Like, it feels a little bit like that now. And I don't know if that's just a sort of an outsider's perspective, but it feels like now the big opportunities is like, can we get our esports star to jump into something more mainstream? Or is that...
I remember Ninja. I remember like being thrilled because I think Ninja, like I put up metrics on a tweet of how much I think it was Twitch was paying versus it was, I said a lot with a little, and Ninja had actually retweeted it, and I was happy he did. My phone started exploding, and I didn't know why. I'll look back and find it. But it really started to show that there was an unfair compensation, which this is something that talent has always, it's not a new issue to esports, by the way. Like, compensation is always going to be, determining value for what people do and create is difficult, right? Like, especially when it's loved by a lot of people. So how you divvy that up, it's always going to be a point of contention. But to your point of, do we need to be outside of esports? I don't think of it as esports anymore. Like, I transcended that in my business thinking, because now it's just competitive entertainment, like any other competitive entertainment. I'm going to give you an example. When Jake Paul fights, right? Like, took over boxing in a lot of ways, and now is making more money. Like, if you're going to go risk your life in UFC for a prize pool that's not even close to what these guys can generate as influencers, right? And that's a fact. And that's tough. Like, that is a hard thing to deal with. And, and there is a ton of economics. It's not UFC being unfair. It's not, the television rights being unfair, but there's a constant ebb, flow, and balance. So when you ask about outside opportunities as an agent, how effective you are, absolutely. I think any agent in any genre of entertainment, getting your talent out of what they're used to doing and what they've come up in, and diversifying them and having them resonate with a new audience, that is the ultimate. Like, what could be better than that as an agent? And to not just provide the opportunity, because it's got to be the right opportunity. It's got to be crafted right. The talent has to like it, and the talent has to deliver, by the way. That's another part of this, right? Like, the talent, everybody assumes the talent always delivers on everything. They don't. And there's a lot of cattle prodding and herding cats. So yes, I think that it is important. It's important for growth of our industry. It's important for growth of, but it's no more important than any other industry we look at, be it the adaptations we're seeing in boxing and the business around that, or be it, Formula One. If you look at Formula One and Drive to Survive and their North American expansion, I didn't know anything about Formula One before that. Now I'm a junkie, mainly because of Simon as well. But it's like, I can tell you, Max Verstappen is now leading points because Lewis Hamilton had a bad finish. He's going to kill me if I get the race wrong. It might have been Monte Carlo, which was really recent.
It was.
Right. Okay. There you go. So it's like, and there's a great segment there on iRacing and esports that we can touch on. But yeah, Paul, I mean, I really think that as an agent, there's nothing better. For me, that was the pinnacle, was getting new opportunities outside of the norm, outside of a keyboard manufacturer or a mouse. And with Secrets, with Ninja, he did a great job single-handedly, graciously capitalizing on what he did without ego, I think, in a lot of sense. And also he did it he took it all as it came, really classy. And what I mean by that is, if you remember the ESPYs that year, more athletes wanted to go meet him than anybody else when he went. When you remember the Super Bowl commercial, like, I look at this stuff because I think of it from a business standpoint. Like, wow, he's in that Super Bowl commercial playing a busboy. And it was like, we could have probably done a little better, but okay, like, I'll take it. It's a win, right? He's in there and he's willing to be self-deprecating, which is great, So I love that. I think that blending I talked to a lot of the sports owners before they came in and consulted for a lot of them. And, it was very important. I was excited because I thought we were going to get a lot of their expertise, and we did get some. But I think that they looked at esports as, this is a great new demo. We don't know what to do with it yet. So
I just have one last question on the talent front, and that is this friction between the esports teams and the traditional agencies. And again, this is one of these sort of themes that has come back on the podcast over and over. And the example I think specifically was there was an announcement that I think it was FaZe that had hired CAA to a partnership, to some kind of deal where they were going to manage their players. And I think William and I both looked at that when we talked about that announcement. We were a bit puzzled because the feeling always has been the esports teams kind of are glorified talent managers, right? They're
no, incorrect.
So this is what I would love to get your perspective on.
Sure, I'll give you a great perspective. Alex Garfield, EG, he was my nemesis, and one that I appreciated as a nemesis because he made me better. But I remember, I think when he sold to Twitch, he framed himself as an agency, but they're not. It's impossible because you have a fiduciary responsibility as an agent to your talent. So how are you, as a team owner, going to make money off that talent, right? And then when they're no longer good or useful, dump them for another talent? No, you're a team owner. Your problem isn't the talent, my friend. Your problem as a team owner is that you don't own the damn game. That's the issue, and that's the separation. Because as an agent, I am playing a traditional role of, you're the team owner, you are going to pay my talent money, and he is going to commit X deliverables to you. And that is like any other sport, right? And if he performs well, then he should get a bonus. And we can get in and talk about like one of my
but Tobias, like a big part of our discussion was, if you remember, like the whole Tfue lawsuit, FaZe Clan, right?
Sure.
Where FaZe was claiming, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, like we made him, right? Like he was nothing before us, right?
Okay.
And in that way, sort of, they sort of present themselves as talent agent's the wrong word, but like being sort of cultivators of talent, right?
You can call it manager. So it's funny because this is a true story. So I was proudly involved with FaZe in the early days, and Banks and I had some. He was in Europe. I forget what he was doing, and we had some back and forth. And man, the passion that kid had, you just knew like he's going to do something big, right? And Tommy, like, those guys just really were about it, and we they could afford not to take deals, which is great. And so what had happened was I knew they had needed management. And Mark Geiger ran the music division. He invented, I believe, Lollapalooza. I loved Mark. All of my time at WME was spent like on the music floor. All my free time was on the music floor. I hired my assistants for music. And Mark was just a cool cat, man. And so Mark had mentioned that Lee Trink, who was Kid Rock's manager, is interested in getting into esports. And he had represented some people that were a little rough. And I thought, okay, I said, I met Lee, and I was like, okay, Lee, I'm going to deliver you the best team in terms of influence right now with a ton of potential. But, and there's no catch here, but just if a good deal comes, let's do the deal, obviously. But like, but they're yours. Like they need the management. They need you. And so we did one phone call. They hired Lee, and Lee got really hands-on. And I think he did some great things for them. And when the Tfue stuff had come out, I was like, oh, this is dicey, because on one hand, you can see how they made him. It's almost like the Apple Epic lawsuit a little bit. And I'll explain, because on one hand, you've got distribution globally that makes you famous on a platform, right?
Yep.
And that should be credited. On the other hand, but see, this is where I think, again, and here's another, Paul, here's another thing I think that's a differentiator on this. And maybe you'll agree with this, maybe you won't, but I think looking at FaZe as a traditional team is hard to do because they are also influencers, right? So they do a great job of that, and maybe they're a victim of their own success in that regard. But every time that you fire somebody in any business, or you are fired, it's a management failure is what that is. It means you couldn't work out a difference or communication. And it doesn't always mean it's the wrong choice. Like maybe it's the right choice, but it is a failure. And I think in that essence, there was a communication or an expectation failure because some expectation was not met. Or, the reason I got into esports as an agent was one, person in particular, and I really won't mention the name this time, just said, screw this contract, I'm not doing it. It was for complexity. And he's like, I'm just not going to adhere to it. I just won't. And so, by the way, real quick, I should say, big fan of everything EG did under Alex and with Alex. And, while we were constantly sort of butting heads, nothing bad. I would go to dinner with it. There's nothing I wouldn't do with Alex. I think he's a great guy.
It's always great. It's always fun to have a good competitor.
Right. Exactly. Now, Did I threaten to sue him once or twice for tortious interference? Yeah, I did. But did I sue him? No. But it felt good to be like, no, this is tortious interference. I have him under contract, and you're not even an agent. Why didn't you just come to me with the deal? We could have done it anyway. But the point is, everything ended up great. And I remember telling Alex, I was on the phone with him, and he told me he was going to sell, and I said, so am I. I'm going to, I didn't tell him it was going to be the WME yet. And I said, dude, don't do it. I said, don't do it. I said, if you hold out another year or two, the sports teams will be here. And he goes, could be 1, could be 2, could be 6. I go, no, it's going to be 2, like at most. Trust me. And I'm sure he did well for himself. But, I digress. To your point, though, Paul, I think FaZe is an outlier. I think that there are bad agents. And I think that many of the good agents suffer from those, because a lot of people think that agents just front load deals for their own benefit because they get a percentage, and that's not the case. They just want a good deal that lasts a long time because that's the best. And they put in a shit ton of work. They really do, and they get none of the credit. Like if you hear somebody like in traditional, whether it's like, if it's like Adele and she thanks her manager, and I'm not picking on her because maybe she thanked her agent as well, but what you need to realize is they always thank the manager, but like there's somebody that did the routing for the tour, and when she needs to reroute, somebody handled that, right? Like that's an agent that's going to handle that. And they never get, like, not only are it's questionable on their compensation, it's questionable on the way that they're even appreciated. But what you're talking about is a little different. What you're talking about is sort of team versus player. We made you this contract. Now, I will say this. I didn't see the contract, but from what I understand, it was onerous. It was not a contract I would have used. When I went to a new team, if I signed a team, let's say you guys own a team, right? My pitch to you would have been like, we're going to bring you new opportunities. We don't want paid on any legacy deals you have. I'm going to put an Exhibit A in our contract that states, here are all the deals you currently have. And on top of that, by the way, Paul and William, since you're both such smart guys, I'm sure you're already talking to other sponsors. Now, let's list the ones that you've started having conversations with. And you can decide, do you want me to take those over, or would you like to continue them on their own? But here's the caveat. All new business comes through us. That was my pitch. And it worked great like that. And we always executed those exhibits. Now, I am not sure what happened with the FaZe contract. I know that those guys they do it, a lot for the culture, for moving it forward. They're true gamers. I think it never surprises me what a lawyer can get in there and mess up. Let's put it that way.
William, I don't know if you had any other questions on this. William, by the way, does own a team.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you had it, but before we jump into any news, William,
should we do some news? No.
Yeah, let's do some news.
Awesome.
Let's do some news.
We got some fun stories too. We got some fun stories here.
And we'll do this a little bit like rapid fire because there's a bunch I want to get through and get Tobias's sort of take on it. We mentioned Epic Apple, and just now. Let's talk about this particular article where I liked the headline. This is obviously an opinion. It's not just straight news. In the Epic versus Apple court fight, there's one clear winner. Apple has shown that its ecosystem is fair. Epic is abusing the public pressure on tech giants. Tobias, we've had this conversation on the podcast previously about Epic versus Apple. What is your take on this? Are you team Apple? Are you team Epic? Where do you stand?
I am team Ace Joseph Sherman, which is my son, because he's the adult in the family. True story. So Ace, we're having this debate this is when you're an esports family, these kind of things you talk about at dinner, right? So we're having this debate as a family. And so what percentage does Epic pay? Is it 30%?
30.
I mean, I have an app on the App Store, Color Collab, which I had did a terrible job promoting today. So, but yeah, thanks, Chris, for stopping by. That was about the biggest promotion. But to that point, so Ace summed it up like this, because at first I was kind of like on the Epic side of this, like, well, where does that line like between the game and here's the perspective my son gave. He said, hold it. You've got Color Collab, and I come to you and I say, hey, great job on that app. What if I told you that I could put that on everybody's phone around the world? What would that be worth to you? And you can monetize through us, and we'll handle all of the taxing, for every region, all of the payment processing for every region. And guess what? It'll be uniform across the board. So there's no fluctuations. And you can choose which market that you want to go ahead and debut in if you really want to. And you can change the price for each market. We're going to give you all of that. And we're going to put you on, I mean, how many handsets does Apple have? Right?
Billions.
We want 30%. Done deal. Right now, let me sign that deal. Of course. And it took the perspective of, let's not think about what they are now and all of their success in, look, I mean, tablets have been around for 10 years before the iPad came out. Let's be honest. Microsoft did it. The beauty of what Jobs did, the beauty of what Apple did was they gave people a reason to use them. And you shouldn't be punished for that on a different scale of economics based on transactions in handsets that people voluntarily buy because they want this phone, right? Or a Samsung phone, whichever, if you're a Neanderthal like Simon. You want to use Android. But I'm kidding. To me, I don't want to over customize my phone. The older I get, it's like, I don't even want to reformat. I'll keep the virus. But the point being is this, like, I think Ace had a really profound statement in that, which was, would you do the deal forgetting about all of Apple's success outside of this, right? It's almost like the Tfue thing again, right? Because it's like, well, we made you, but Apple's not even saying we made you. They're just saying we put you everywhere. We just don't want you circumventing our system.
Yeah.
So I think that Ace did a great job of getting me on Team Apple. It's a cult. We're all in a cult. It's not a problem. It's a feature. What do you want me to tell you?
So you and I are in total agreement because I've been Team Apple since the beginning. I guess because I know you are also a fan of Epic, just in general. Do you think it's maybe indicative that like this whole lawsuit, they're distracted by this, like that they've taken their eye off the ball a little bit? Maybe Tim Sweeney has become too much of like, trying to. Because it's easy for him, right? The guy's worth billions and billions, right? Going on a sort of a crusade to try and solve this. I mean, he has this luxury. But do you think it's a distraction for Epic Games specifically, like as a company?
I don't think it is an impactful one, and I'll tell you why. I think the people that go there to work every day aren't going there worried about it. I don't think it's even on their mind. I think they may see a headline. It's like it's probably like, banner blindness for, where all the advertisers are on a browser. So you won't, bother to look there. You've trained yourself. So I think a lot of it is like mindfully, cognizantly ignoring it, or even subliminally just not worried about it. I don't think that it affects it that way. Do I think that it started? I think there is a part of it that was genuine. That was like, wait, we can make an impact here. And look, when you have as much success as they did in Fortnite and get as much right as they did, do you know how long I've wanted to do like a live concert in a game? Like I've talked about it at panels, like getting talent integrated into games, like amazing. Like they did so much I wanted to do. And I wasn't like, oh, damn, I didn't get to do that. I was like, yes, go. Like, but when you have that much success, now that fast, it's a good thing to ask, because it's like at the upper echelon, there's people at the top that it is a distraction. And does that trickle down? It could, it could. So I can see it both ways. I don't think for the boots on the ground doing the day-to-day it matters. I think it's more of maybe even an ego versus sort of, I'm doing the right thing here. Can't people see that?
I especially liked Tim Cook's so response to one of the questions, like he didn't know who Tim Sweeney was. One of the emails he got that surfaced in this lawsuit, which, I guess if you're Tim Sweeney, that hurts. I want to move on because we've got a lot here, guys. And this one, William, I want your view on this because this is in your book, in fact, right? In terms of
anything from the book.
In terms of frameworks. But this is an article about Overwatch 2, which was recently announced. And the headline here, we're going to get into multiple pieces of this Overwatch 2 puzzle, but the headline here is, will Overwatch 2 be free to play? And you have been hardcore bent on the idea that Overwatch 1 should have been free to play from the beginning. In fact, it's in your book, William, and the the framework around accessibility being an important part. Do you think Blizzard will go there? Are we going to see Overwatch 2 free to play? And will it make a difference?
So, I mean, this is literally in the book. But I mean, so anyone who reads the book, if you don't get this from reading the book, like, I don't know, you didn't read the book. There are 4 core factors that are driving the success of esports. And accessibility is one of those factors. And one of the largest ways to drive accessibility for title is free to play, right? Zero price. Because if something costs money, it's harder to adopt. It's harder to try, right? And in general, if you have a product that you are proud of, an experiential product, right? Giving it away is generally a great strategy because people are hesitant with experiential goods, and try and then buy is a very effective, historically proven market. So I basically do not see how you can launch any major esport today without being free to play. And if anybody, and you can even look within the own category of Activision Blizzard, I think things like Warzone have vastly outperformed their own internal expectations. And I bet there was a huge debate of, does Call of Duty ever have a free-to-play component? Because we get $60 checks every 12 months. We put out a new version. So it's in my mind, it's not a choice. It has to be. And I think you can impute many, maybe not all, but many of the challenges that Overwatch League has had to the fixed price point for the game, because they're competing against things like League of Legends or Valorant now, which are zero, or Counter-Strike maybe is the better example with, Tobias on our podcast here, which are, well, Counter-Strike is not such good examples, but a lot of these games are free, right? They're absolutely free. So it's very tough. So yeah, this has to be, in my mind, it's like, how has this not been announced yet as a free-to-play game? Because it has to be relevant.
Can we conclude that it won't be free to play? Do you think that's why it hasn't been announced? Tobias, what do you think are the chances that Blizzard puts this out at Overwatch 2 as free to play?
Well, how much do they care about esports? That's what Simon would say. Simon's looking at this as indicative of, if they care about esports, which, by the way, improves your bottom line long term, pretty proven, then it should be free to play. I mean, look, they'll do telemetry on what they can forecast sales as a publicly traded company, and you can argue that they're great at that and their stock price and all this, but there's going to come a point where, and I mean, it already sort of happened. When everybody made fun of Riot for being free to play, and the everybody sees the success they are now, they forgot the shit they got shoveled, pardon my language, but they did on, well, that can't work, right? Like, they've been told that can't. And what do you mean you're just going to have cosmetic skins? That can't work. And it's like, if you care about the space, you want to grow the pie. And to William's point, if you're proud of your product and you can monetize without having to put that price tag on there, why not do that? Like, please. Do I think they'll do it? Was your question? I'm so sorry. Yeah. I'm getting emotional about it. I think they may cave if there's enough pressure. I think right now the plan is probably no, or they would have said it. And I think if they get enough pressure, they will do it, because that pressure will, if they think it'll affect their stock price. Here's what it boils down to. It's simple economics for them. If the pressure would affect their stock price as an upside more to go free to play than it would that they could just charge people and say, heck on it. Outriders, like, you're putting a game out that has bugs again after we just went through this with Anthem. Are you kidding me? Like, it's a money grab, and it's an unnecessary one. And to William's point, you shouldn't do money grabs with esports. You're putting out a quality product. Why wouldn't you want that in everybody's hands? I mean, God, it's just a smarter long-term play if you want to be competitive. We have a big, here's what I'll end on this thought for myself, and please feel free to debate it. But for me, it's like, this is very simple. I use soccer as an example, not so much in America, but globally, soccer is so loved because anybody with an empty field, a can, and, 2 pylons or whatever they put as goalposts can play soccer. You don't need a ball. And we're horrible at that with esports. Like, we need to get better at accessibility, whether that means providing computers, going more mobile. Wild Rift, amazing. Wild Rift is so good. There's so many quality of life changes in Wild Rift as a mobile title. I don't want to play traditional League anymore. I can pin the dragon and say, attack the dragon. Why can't I do that? Like, there's a lot we can improve. So I'm not all a fanboy for Riot. I can pick on them too. The point is this. We have an obligation to grow the space, like it or not. We have an obligation to do that. You have an obligation to your shareholders. And if you can't articulate to your shareholders why this is going to be better, you don't deserve the position of the executive that you are. And I'm not just saying Bobby, any of them. If you can't explain that and you can't understand it yourself, you've outdated yourself and you should resign.
But, Tobias, it's an interesting sort of bigger topic here, and I'd love to dig in just a little bit, which is, my simple view is when you have big companies like Activision Blizzard looking at esports, or any company that has got into esports, any game publisher, they have, I think, one of 3 goals. They approach it one of 3 ways, right? It's either esports is a marketing cost that will get more people to play our game, right? And I put Fortnite in that category. Sure. 2, esports is who we are, and we see it as an engine for growth for the business and to drive revenue and profitability long term. And I would put like League of Legends and Riot in that category.
Why they have their own division for that. Yeah.
Right.
Separate.
And then the third is like esports is hot and it's a cash grab, and we're not sure how we're going to make it work long term, but there's a lot of money out there to go get right now.
I mean,
and I personally put Activision Blizzard in that third box.
Yes. I mean, hello, like, absolutely. Like, look at StarCraft. Are you kidding me? You couldn't make a call to Papa John's Pizza when GOM TV in Korea is ordering Papa John's. They're eating it in the crowd. You can't make that phone call. Are you kidding me? Like, just do it just because you can. No, you're stifling yourself. Like, it was amazing to me. Like, it's like, well, StarCraft is a game, doesn't make that much more money. Well, there's a bigger thing here, buddy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't, like, stop stepping over dollars to pick up the pennies. The problem is, at scale, those pennies equal hundreds of millions. So now, one of the coolest things I've ever heard Thorin say, ever, was after I was invited to DreamHack, one of my favorite events. We were on a panel together. They were doing something in actually not Jönköping, but in Sweden. And at that time, Thorin summed it up perfectly. He said, what's the difference between sports and esports? How do we get to where the sports are? And he goes, esports are 100,000-aires arguing with a few other 100,000-aires over what should happen. Sports is billionaires arguing with millionaires over what should go on next. And that was the truth, right? That was pre-valuations and everything. It was so insightful because now, we saw that catch up. Now, I think that if you're going to charge what you charge for those franchises, yeah, I think the teams should demand it's going to be free to play. And by the way, I'm on the record of saying this a million times, and I'm not afraid to say it. I don't understand. Nobody understands. Even, a lot of people gave Morgan Stanley, like a 14-year-old on Reddit, broke down the Morgan Stanley report when they were first coming out with Overwatch, going, none of this is right. Like a 14-year-old. And it scares me because if you're getting that much wrong and you're analyzing this, what other genre are you getting? Are you getting what other global economic genre are you off on, Morgan Stanley? Like, seriously. But the point is, when you look at it and you say, I'm going to charge you however X amount of millions, my whole solution was simple. For the people I consulted for, I said, look, if you're going to spend that much money, every competitive title they ever come out with is your franchise. But the idea was, no, we're going to franchise, celebrities and everybody else, and we're going to go a different direction with Call of Duty. And it's just greed at the end of the day. It's unnecessary. And I think that when you get too greedy too fast, it's going to have negative consequences. And you can blame COVID, and you can name it. And I'm not going to throw rocks in a glass house or base my whole life on what I did in the past. Like, I'm going to come out with a title myself here that's going to have plenty of we're going to stub our toe, I'm sure. But I'm going to err on the side of the community and growing it. And I think that I don't want to get too long-winded. I'm afraid I already have, but it's worth saying that if you're a team, you better be demanding for that growth, that it is free to play and that the patches are more community sensitive than not.
So let me ask both of you guys a final question on this, because of all the conversations we've had and I've had with team owners in Overwatch League, this is like behind closed door, like off the record, right? Like many of them have said, Overwatch 2 is what we're counting on. And it's what Activision Blizzard is telling us is going to save the day, is going to save Overwatch League, right? If Overwatch 2 is not free to play, do you think there is any chance of this? I'm curious, both of you guys, if what William, maybe your take first.
William. Yeah, please, William.
No. I mean, I can answer that incredibly easily. No. In fact, it's, and I just think that is so apparent to people in the space that part of me believes the reason why Overwatch 2 has not yet been announced as free to play is just they're saving the PR closer to launch. You know, that there might be an all guns blazing strategy for this, because I think also, as easy as it is for us to see the importance of Overwatch 2 to the future of Overwatch, it's also got to be pretty apparent to the folks at Activision Blizzard around that. So, you know, I look, I don't know, but no, I think it absolutely has to be. There's no way. What do you think, Tobias?
I was big on the press. I supported Nate over there from day one on the league. They got a lot of it right. Not all of it made it. We wanted to do a combine at IMG Academy, which I thought would have been really cool content and a great way to introduce the competitors and a great way for teams to see ratings on the competitors, on how they deliver a sponsor message. All these things should be on the table, and it should be free to play. And I will say this, can it achieve the success it can as free to play if it's paid? No way. Like, forget about saving the day. You just can't achieve the most you can without being in everybody's hands, at all at once, because they can debut the game like this, make it free to play, and think about that for a second. You can download it and start having that experience. And if it's a good experience, and even if it isn't, like, how many gamers start off on it's a shit game, and we have no self-respect. Let's get that clear. Gamers, we have zero self-respect. Every Reddit article is going to be like, "Well, the publishers working weekends." And it was Angry Joe podcast or Angry Joe review on Outriders. When he ends it, or at some point he says, have a little self-respect, have a little dignity. I'm like, yeah, that's the truth. And so waiting on the publisher to save the day ain't going to happen. The teams need to unify, go in there, get a collective bargain, get somebody that's not me, that's like me, that isn't afraid to go in there and say, no, this is just not going to work. It needs to be this because of this, or just start walking out of the contract, because you put too much money in to make Blizzard more money and not have the league be successful. And I had Overwatch on ELeague, did the deal. They were great. I was behind Nate. I was not behind what they were charging for franchises. I was not for the way they were going to franchise. But nobody gets everything perfect, and kudos for taking the swing, but you better stick by them. You better stick by those owners, because, they're the ones that are driving it. But Paul, it goes back to what you said as well. It's like, you're in that camp of, well, we really can't figure it out, but it all makes money. So what's best for us as Activision Blizzard,
which Bobby is great at. He really is. I mean, the stock price has done incredibly well. Guys, before we wrap up, Tobias, I just wanted to touch on one last thing here. Not a news story, but anything you can talk about sort of the games you have in development or game in development.
Sure.
And I think it's interesting because, and William, I'm sure you'll back me up on this. Like, we had Andre Yanyuk from Tempo Storm, right, on the podcast. And in a similar sort of vein, he talked about how, they started as Tempo Storm started as an esports team, and they realized, all the sponsor dollars, the biggest chunk of sponsor dollars flowing into their company was from game publishers who wanted their guys playing the games on stream, right? This is like the big chunk of revenue now in the ecosystem is from the publishers who want your influencers to play the game. And he had sort of this light bulb moment, which was like, well, why are we advertising someone else's game if we have these influencers that can drive downloads and drive, engagement. Let's go just make a game ourselves, which they've embarked on. And I think it's interesting that I'm starting to see this like pattern of, and maybe there's only 2 or 3 data points now, but of people who are not primarily game developers first, but have other pieces of the puzzle and realize game development is a very interesting path. So would love your thought on that, and then maybe just a little bit about the game you're building.
Yeah, so I wasn't an agent. I wasn't an assistant through Hollywood. I didn't come up through the ranks, know anything about it. And, I ended up selling to the greatest agency that just went public, right? Like they're arguably one of the best agencies to ever exist. And Ari's arguably the best to ever do it, and Patrick Weitzel. So if you look at that, like I had no experience there. And then I went and made a TV show and pitched these executives a week later. I don't know. I didn't know I'd never pitched a TV show before, right? But that gives you like insight into none of these people are really any smarter than anybody else. If you care enough about the project, you're willing to work hard and educate yourself, anybody can build a game. And it is the truth. And by the way, with the tools that Unreal now has and Unity, what we're seeing here, again, scratching the surface. You see how it's even affecting Mandalorian and Hollywood. A lot of people using it for set design. I think that here's the issue. We are trying to build this in a way. Now, I do understand. I'm gonna let me go to this aspect of it too. I do understand how in dealing with teams, and I've dealt with a lot of them, it gets frustrating. And there's always 1 or 2 that are just like, oh, I got to call this guy. I recently had run into, I was golfing at the Wynn. I live in Las Vegas, and I golf there quite a bit. And as I was leaving, it was a great moment for me because I saw Steve from Liquid and the guys from TSM were all there, I've done various deals with all of them through ELeague and other opportunities. And it's always a smile and like hugs, like, because we're in this industry together. So it doesn't surprise me. I believe I told Steve. I know I told Jack from Cloud9 that, hey, I'm embarking on this game thing, right? So and I fully expected that. Why wouldn't they try to figure out how to at least gamify their talent? And then you start thinking, well, why is the talent waiting for the team to do it? Maybe the talent goes out and does their own game because they hold that much influence. And by the way, I think it's all great. Is all of it going to succeed? No. We have a different take on it, right? We have a totally different take. Ours is we are looking to there. We have 2. It's sort of bifurcated. We could either, if we go a traditional league route, we have no interest in gaining money from that league. That's all for the teams. As a publisher, that is all for the teams, right? Like it is a truly selfless, how do we support you? And that's all we want to do. Because I don't think it's going to work otherwise. Like we won't get to we haven't seen a ton of innovation since like ELeague and Riot selling out stadiums, right? We need some. The other way we go is teams might not even necessarily be, I would look at them more as marketing agencies. Right? They're going to market the talent, the individual talent. So you might not even necessarily need to be on a team. Our game, Cash Royale, is a lot more aspirational. And Battle Royale has been done to death, right? But what we're doing is a lot different in terms of venue and how you can play it and how you can enter it. And I think even we're seeing some games have some influence from some ideas that we've shared, which I don't mind. I think that's great. I think that I'm not going to, well, that person stole my idea. I've never been one of those. Like, that's great. Like, execution is as important, is more important than the idea itself. Oh, I had that idea. Well, you should have executed, right? So, what is important to us though is user-generated content, and not just for earned media, but that the users can make money. So that's where Color Collab comes into play, where we have a bunch of great line artists, of course, from Tattoo, because they're some of the best line drawers there are, and you can color in these pieces however you want. Chris and I will be doing a show together called Tastemakers, where I actually get in front of the camera. Between me, you, and the rest of the audience, I'm terrified. But what we do is we go around and he teaches traditional art. I teach esports. So, for example, I was on the phone with Hector today because I was like, I'm not doing the show unless we go see Hector from Optic, because he's like my guy. That's my favorite person in probably the entire space. So sorry to disappoint everybody else. Hector, T-Pain, we're going to go see T-Pain as well. He's huge into gaming. He's been a longtime friend. And then there's some great people that Chris has lined up for more of the traditional art style. And the reason I bring all this up, I'm not trying to, do a commercial for collab. I'm trying to express that it's important to us as a company culture to be able to give a platform that does inspire aspiration, that says I can create a weapon skin and have that skin be in the game and sell that skin and make money as a person. Like I can have a whole career. It's almost a lot of inspiration from YouTube. I apologize. My dog is like scratching at the door, but it's a lot like when you look at YouTube and Bill Maher had recently attacked, I think it was Twitter or no, excuse me. Twitch. Rather.
Yeah.
And Ryan from YouTube had some bold things to say, like amazing, applaud, like awesome. He's like, I'm tired of these boomer takes, yada, yada. And it's, I'm not doing his tweet justice, but when I read it, I was like, right on, man, because, okay, Bill, you have a massive studio worth tens of millions of dollars behind you on a traditional network that's huge. These kids are getting better viewership than you are in their room with a webcam. So I don't want to hear it. Like, how about you start over in that medium and see how you do, see how relevant you are, right? Like they're fellow entertainers. Have a little professional courtesy. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Watching video games is boring. Well, it gets into a lot of that. We want to combat that by saying user-generated content's important. Anybody can be a creator. Hell, if you use our game to create a game, great. And collab is one step to do that, to make it a little bit easier, if you will. So I get weird talking about our stuff. I'd rather I like more topic on the topical things and saving some of that stuff for the press releases where I'm okay to talk about it, just because it doesn't feel so. I hate doing like commercials for my own stuff, right? So. There you go.
Well, our audience, I'm sure, is interested. William, I don't know if you had anything before I wrap up here.
No, I think it's awesome. I mean, I guess I have to ask. I mean, I guess, Tobias, you have the nickname Tumba, right? Like, can you tell us how you got that nickname? And is it in any way related to the PlayStation Classic platformer? I don't know.
No. So, okay. So, my dad, who's I won't say the antithesis. We have similarities. It was his nickname. It was Tumba. So I was always Little Tumba. And I wanted the nickname. Like I really wanted it to stick because it was there for a while and it left. And when I had to have a handle for MLG, I was like Tumba. And there are people that didn't know my real name. Like I don't think Apicella or like Sundance married me. It's like Sundance married myself and I think that for the longest time it was always Tumba. He didn't know it was Tobias, right? So it was my dad's nickname. No really like pivotal story or anything other than I just wanted to share, my dad's sort of my hero. My parents are great. I had great parents and great step parents. So kudos to them. And I just wanted to share in that a little bit. So that's
I always like to ask. So that's my last question.
I did find the tweet though, in case, because I think it's business. I am so
I did see it. Okay, it is interesting. Yeah. And the tweet was just for the record, because I do think it's hilarious.
Oh my God.
It's with Twitch valuing Overwatch at $90 million over 2 years. This begs the question, what is a deal worth with Ninja level viewership?
And then I posted the viewership, right? Yeah.
Well, in the end, he sort of did make that kind of money, right? Out of his Mixer deal.
Sure.
He did, right? That 50 million. There you go. I agree. I agree.
It's like saying, what does LeBron or any of these athletes deserve? Well, they're driving the viewership. So a lot is the answer.
100%.
Guys, I wanted to say, look, thank you so much for having me on. I was, it was very, I feel almost cathartic to get on with you guys because, you are so well versed in the space. And when I had to zoom into creating the game and to giving support to Simon anywhere I can, so he can have his brilliant shine, sometimes I have to zoom out. I don't have as much time to sort of follow. And it is so great what you guys are doing in terms of this podcast and touching on these things because they need to be brought up, right? There needs to be somebody brave enough to say, well, writers are only writing because they want an invitation to BlizzCon. And even they know that Overwatch is going to fail, but they're not going to say it. They're going to write a candid piece on, now I've been a beneficiary of this as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not, again, going to throw rocks in a glass house, but guys, thank you so much. As soon as Cash Royale fails, maybe I can be like the third host on this. Where do I drop off my application is what I'm saying.
Tobias, we do a live stream every Wednesday evening. You're more than welcome to join us anytime. I will say I have two last things. One, sure. If people want to reach you or follow you, or if you want to be reached, where can they follow you? Where can they reach out to you? What are the best platforms?
I really had toned down all social, but I'm going to get more involved as we have more announcements with Collab and in the show, and Chris and I doing stuff together. So at Tobias Sherman on Twitter.
Perfect.
And I am not sure what my Instagram is, but I should probably, considering that we have a competitive coloring book, nobody's going to download. Let's be honest. Nobody's going to download the coloring book to see me do art, right? So it doesn't really matter. But as I check the phone, it's _Tumba on Instagram. If you like pictures of golf and snowboarding, that's what you'll get there. I try to like actually have a life outside of gaming and have some balance.
Love it. _Tumba. And the last thing, Tobias, and this is maybe the most important question we've asked all the evening. I'm sure you still have very good contacts at WMEIMG. What are they waiting for in terms of signing the Prophet and the Professor? I mean, I'm assuming that offer is in the mail, right? At some point.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I'll be honest. Bloomberg did an article when I left that I'm sure they wish was taken down. I went with they tried to goad me into like why are you leaving? And I went with the old Spock answer from the new movies, which was, the only emotion I wanted to express is gratitude, and I meant it. It was a bit sudden of a departure but we knew we had to make it, or else we were never going to get a chance to make a game, right? So, having said that, it's a damn hardworking company. They went through a real hard time with COVID, and I'm shocked that you guys haven't had the offer yet. So we're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to make a phone call.
That's it.
And figure out what the hell's going on here.
Guys, thank you.
Why aren't you guys on Turner? We gotta get Craig Berry on here.
Working on it. Yeah. Tobias, thank you as always. William, thank you. You guys are amazing. Guys, just a bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned, don't forget, tune into our live stream. It happens every Wednesday evening. We do it after the podcast, after we tape the podcast, Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, basically everywhere you get our content. And also follow us on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. It's all Biz Esports or the Business of Esports. Follow us on all those platforms. And don't forget, go buy William's book, The Book of Esports, on Amazon, and leave a review on Amazon if you love it. Thank you guys as always, and we'll see you next week.